performance people generally.
Just recording now, so here we
Sure,
go.
sure. I find that high performance people are very, obviously very driven. And so there tends to be less chaos with them. It's the people just below that level that there's a lot of chaos because I think they're scrambling to become that elite, but they're not quite there. But they're better than the average. So they've kind of stuck in no man's land. They're never going to really quite reach that upper limit because you can't put in what God left out. Okay, so it's you can improve. Everyone can improve, but you can only improve with what you've got. If a car's got three wheels, it's not going to corner very well.
Yeah.
So you can get it around it, but it's going to take some while. But yeah, chaos, maybe chaos theory. Jeff Goldblum, dinosaurs running around eating people. Um, chaos takes forms in many different ways. I think, and
Yeah.
life is chaotic. I think. With what you were saying earlier, meditation, it's a great way to control the chaos
Mm.
and the chaos going on in your mind and the chaos going on around us as well. Right now, you said about the lovely weather you've got. We've got flooding here back in the
Yeah,
UK.
that's right. I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and the track that I belong to, one direction was flooded on Monday evening,
Yeah.
and we just got notification through that the other entrance is flooded now as well from the Thames. So it's not just a big puddle; it's
Yeah.
literally the River Thames coming across the road. So we've got to look at the chaos around that and where we can find Plan B to
Mm.
another track where we can get everyone to and continue with the training really because the fun never stops.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
let's look at this, right? So as a high performance coach, because that's what you are, you help people hopefully get to the Olympics and achieve amazing results, hopefully medals, etc. Right? Let's talk about high performance and in this chaotic world, and you mentioned it earlier about what it is about elite individuals, why they don't seem to be living in chaos. So what are the things that people do that make them high performers that the average person or even a good person doesn't tend to do?
I think one of the things is a bit like you were describing with your scuba diving.
Yeah.
You show no fear,
Mm.
and I've been lucky enough to work with several people. One in particular is now just become a close personal friend and almost a daughter figure because I've known her since she was a young teenager, and she babysits my kids now. And we went
Yeah.
out for dinner a couple of weeks ago. She doesn't really show any fear. Whether she actually has any or not, I don't know. But certainly
Mm.
from an external point of view, she is very driven,
Hmm.
but not to the point where she's rude. She will quite happily chat to you and very rarely talk to you about running unless you ask a specific question.
Right. Okay.
She tends to put her running in the running basket and everything else in the rest of her life in different baskets. And she's
So
quite organized.
she compartmentalizes her life, does she?
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. She's very good like that. So when it's time to switch on and do the business, she's 100% focused on training.
Mm.
When she gets to the competition, it's interesting now because some of it's for TV because you have to generate the interest with the public, especially our sport. It's a relatively minor sport,
Yeah.
athletics compared
It's
to
it's
football.
underfunded, isn't it?
Oh, severely. I mean, the governing body's gone bust. It's having to be bailed out by Sport England.
Mm.
The people that were running it weren't particularly good, lost sponsorship deals and so on and so on. We didn't really have, we've got some great athletes, but we haven't got the likes of Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett and Steve
Yeah.
Brown and Denny Thompson. And
Oh, those were the days.
those were the days where Great Britain literally had half a dozen
Oh
Usain
yeah.
Bolts at the
Yeah.
same time. Most countries are lucky if they occasionally get a Usain once in a while, but
Mm.
they've had four or five or six or seven Usain Bolts all at the same time, overlapping one after the other.
Yeah.
Then the second generation of Linford Christie and Colin Jackson and Sally Gunnell and
Tessa
Denise Lewis.
Sanderson and Fatima Whitbread and all that.
Yeah, I mean, we were just so blessed to have so many great athletes. And I think since a lot of those big names retired, and
Mm.
they were big names, they weren't just on the sports page at the back of the newspaper. They were on the front cover.
Yes. Yeah.
There's one interesting story. Well, if you're into that sort of thing, there's one interesting story about Sebastian Coe who was going for a world record one evening, and the 9 o'clock news actually interrupted the news to go live to watch him run. Now that
Brilliant.
doesn't happen too often, maybe there's penalties at the World Cup,
Yes.
and they might pause for that, but I can't remember any other occasion where the news has been interrupted to go watch some
Mm.
guy run around a running track. But that's how big it was back then, and we haven't got those names. So I think you do have to kind of promote yourself a little bit. But with Shalana, if you look at the other athletes, they're kind of waving to the camera and they're bouncing around, they're smiling,
Yeah.
they've got their nails done and their hair's all glamorous and makeup's on. And Cheryl's just there ready to fight. She just looks all business. The camera might look at her and she might give a brief sort of glimpse of a smile, but she's there to do the running. And
Right.
and I think, unless you're so good, like you say, where you can have a little bit of laugh just beforehand. And I think that's the way he deals with it, to be honest. He's nervous, just like everyone else. I think he deals with his nerves by deflecting all of his pressure off onto everyone else, by
Yeah.
kind of laughing and joking, and everyone else is thinking, what is it with this guy? He's there's no fear at all. And I think there is with everyone, but you just got to control it.
So let's talk about this fear thing as the first point. So in this sort of topic of high performance in chaos, one of the things that you'll find is that if you want to push yourself and be an elite performer, whether that's in athletics or business or life generally, you'll have to push yourself out of the comfort zone that you're used to, right? And I look at these sort of zones, the comfort zone is a place that I would say 80% of people consistently live in. And then outside of the comfort zone is that fear zone where obviously you've never been there before, or you've heard stories about it, and it's all quite intimidating, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine standing in a stadium running 100 meters and a billion people are watching you on television, or you're under immense pressure, or even at work where you've got to do that Zoom presentation to 100 people and you've never done it before, so it's all new. And you can think of 100 reasons why you shouldn't do it, couldn't you? Right?
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to master the art of controlling, because all fear is an emotion, isn't it? Actually,
Yeah.
it's an
Yeah.
emotional response to a thought that you've placed in your head based on your perception of an anticipation of what you think the future situation is going to hold for you.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can replay that in a different way, then surely how you respond to it and the actions then you take moves you into what we would call sort of the learning zone, which is instead of looking at the worst case scenario, it's like like you mentioned, when I was scuba diving in Jamaica as an example, I wasn't scared of it, even though it was the first time I've ever done it. But I was so excited by anticipating the unknown in a constructive, helpful, bright way,
Yeah.
And I was visualizing in my head what it might be like because I wasn't sure or certain under the sea, and it's fantastic. And it was exactly that and more. And I didn't think about what could go wrong and scuba diving being the most dangerous pastime on the planet. I don't think of those things. I
Eaten
think,
alive by
yeah.
tiger sharks.
Yeah. And I just thought, well, what am I going to gain? It's all about a set of questions. It's what am I going to experience? It's going to be great. And what am I going to gain from this experience? And how do I want to feel when I get? Whereas what I think people do is they go, well, that's not going to work, is it? Because I've never done that before. And I feel really insecure about that because I don't know that topic really well. And they put all these barriers in the way, but it stops you learning and growing. And that's where, if you want to perform at a high level in a world of absolute distraction, I think you've got to learn the mind mastery is the key to managing fear, isn't it? I think, and you must know that in sports psychology, surely.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about distractions, I mean, we've got social media now that is distracting people. I mean, you can easily scroll through your phone for an hour and you've lost an hour that day.
Mm.
What happened there? But the chaos that surrounds so many people, I think, is as comes down to, as you say, amongst other things, fear.
Mm.
And everyone's had a scary situation. I've had a few medically scary situations.
Yes, you
with my
have.
son,
Yeah.
and some of my other friends and so on. Some of them, have managed to deal with it incredibly well.
Mm.
And I mean, the COVID is a really good example. Some people didn't even know they had it. And some people didn't even accept the fact that there was even COVID.
Mm.
And other people have died from COVID. It's in a very extreme situation, and that was chaotic. You didn't know whether to stay in, didn't know whether to go out. Prime Minister didn't know, and half the country didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. So there's chaos there. From my point of view as a coach, there was chaos. What do we do? Do we have to stay in? Do we go out? Do we train? Do we exercise? What do we do? And that has a knock-on effect. What competitions can we do? What's going to be available for us? What's the point in training if there isn't anything to train for? And to try and keep the motivation of those people going, knowing, positively thinking that there will be something for them to go back to. So there was a lot of things like that. Fear, I don't know. I think sport, certainly for me, all my friends have come directly or indirectly through sport. And I think, to be honest with you, you're the only person I really met from a work point of view that I've remained friends with. And I think also a little bit of that is because obviously you're a great bloke, but also we have that sporting connection, that, from that kind of mindset as well. I know you've done an incredible 7 marathons in 7 days. You've done mixed martial arts. You work out in the gym all the time. You're someone that loves to exercise, and you get those endorphins from there. Some of the sessions, I'm sure even you would have been quite daunted by it. Having to think, I'm going to run a marathon, which is hard enough anyway, and I've got to do another one the next day, and another one, and another one. And the thought of that can be quite frightening and off-putting. And I when I was running, I wasn't a particularly good runner. I was very average, but there were some training sessions that I was quite scared of, and I knew they were going to hurt. And nothing's going to happen to me. I'm not going to die. It might feel like I'm dying while I'm doing the session, but I'm not actually going to die. I'm going to be puffed out for a little bit, and after a few minutes, I'll be fine. I can walk off. Might be a bit tired, but you live to fight another day. I think certainly from that mindset point of view, and I think that's why there's a lot of sports people in psychology, is because there's a lot of transferable skills from that, where you can learn to deal with pressure of training sessions, pressure of competitions, pressure of trying to beat someone that you've never beaten before. I was at a relatively low level, but I used to enjoy trying to keep up with, or maybe see if I could beat someone that hadn't beaten before. Maybe if I hadn't run against them before, see how well I compared to them. I was lucky enough to come just at the very tail end of the Co-Cramino vets, where there was a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a respite, where a few other people could kind of sneak in and do a couple of races here and there. Prior to that, you had these monsters that were just destroying the world. To have 3, maybe with Peter Elliott, 4 Mo Farahs all at the same time running pretty much the same distances over 8 and 15. Then there was a bit of a lull, but a few people managed to get in there when they went away. But some of my friends carried on, and they competed against athletes they'd never beaten before. Mark Richardson was running against the great Michael Johnson, who was by far the world's greatest ever 400-meter runner. Although his world record's since been broken, he's still by far the best 400-meter runner. And Mark beat him. And he not only beat him, he beat him at a track which is a relatively tight track, and from lane 1. And for a sprinter, for those that don't know, lane 1 is the tightest bend on the track. And so it's usually considered by sprinters not a particularly good one to be in. For distance runners, it's great because it's the shortest route. But he beat Michael Johnson, and that must have been both incredibly exciting, but also terrifying before the race. So you're lined up against the greatest 400-meter run of all time. You want to have a go, but you don't really think you've got a chance. But perhaps Mark's mindset is completely different to a normal person. And he obviously thought he had a chance, and he came off the bend, he took that chance, and he beat Michael. And I think that's the difference. People who believe in themselves and believe anything is possible can make things possible. It's a little bit like the lottery. The chances of winning are minuscule. But if you're not in it, you definitely ain't going to win. If you buy a ticket, at least you've got a chance. And it's the kind of a mindset I look at life with.
Yeah, I mean, we both know Mark Richardson. You know much better than I do. But he's a top guy. And that I remember watching that as a kid, actually, or a young man watching it and thinking he's got no chance. And he did it. And then actually speaking to him about it is fascinating. Because because as you say, the chances of him winning that race for most people were, including me, 0. because
Yeah,
the greatest 400 meters on the planet ever probably was in that
yeah,
race, and he did it. And I just think, people talk about, we talked about fear, and we talked about managing that by painting a more constructive image in your mind of what the future and what certainty should look like. But also, I think people are deceived by motivation, right? I don't think motivation actually is a particularly powerful tool on its own. Obviously, someone like Mark needed motivation to enable him to explode out the block and go and do what he did. And everyone needs motivation because it gets you up in the morning and gets you to do those certain things. But I just think, in 100 years' time, Roger, none of us will be here, right? None of us. No one will remember me. You know,
Oh, I think there'll be statues made of you, mate.
they definitely won't. But the point being is, life is a nonsense, really. What we should be associating ourselves with is our close-knit family and friends and doing great stuff for ourselves, actually, just to enable us to live a fulfilling life, whatever that looks like. So if you're going to be a parent, be a bloody brilliant one, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be a friend, be a brilliant friend. If you're going to be an athletics coach, if you're going to be a business coach, do it the best of your ability. Then you can look back and go, I did it, because no one's going to remember you in 100 years time. They're not. So all of the cars that you're worried about, all of the trainers that you've got to buy, all of the things, the weather, it's a complete and utter nonsense. So what you've got to do is be motivated by living every day, I think, to the best of your ability and enjoying it. And I think high performers, especially in business and especially in athletics, because there's a synergy there, isn't there? They're the ones that sometimes do things that they're not motivated to do, the daily routine, the daily graft, that, having to not eat certain things to enable them to be leaner or faster or quicker because they know it's an enabler. It's called discipline. And now we are creating a society, I think, of people that are the complete opposite of being disciplined. They are hedonistic, and they worry so much about people's opinions and what they're doing today and what they can consume and being right and not being wrong and perfectionism. I just think it's distracting and deflecting from meaningful work. And I think if you can just distill what you do down into 3 or 4 little parts, we talked about compartments, and just be brilliant at those 3 or 4 different things, I think you'll be in a better place for it. And I don't quite know what happened with Mark in that particular instance, in that particular race, but it all just came together, didn't it? His
Yeah.
preparation, his mindset, his discipline, his motivation, it all just collided in the right place, didn't it?
Well, I think, like you said, you hit the nail on the head with his preparation. Some of these athletes, a long time ago now, but quite often we're training twice a day, 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year, and it might take 10 years of doing that before you get good. I mean, good like Olympic good.
Yeah.
So Shalana is a really good example, young teenage girl from Slough. Nothing particularly special about her other than the fact that she had joined a club, which she was probably quite close to leaving because things weren't massively great at home. But she was convinced to stay, and she put the work in. She realised what she could do
Yeah.
if she took all the advantages that were put her way, and she succeeded, and she was able to prepare herself for what was going to come. And then when it came, she had the mindset to be able to deal with it. And I think with Mark, maybe, I mean, I've known him very, very well. We've gone out many times. We haven't very often spoken about that race, to be honest, which is, I'm quite surprised now thinking about it. But
Mm.
perhaps he just thought, you know what, I've trained really hard. This guy's good, but he's a human. It's possible someone could beat him. Why not me today? Let's go out and see what we can do. And I think if you're in with a shout, you're quite close to someone, then it's anybody's game. There was a going back to my sport, there's a guy called Ingebrigtsen from Norway, and he's been running incredible times across the board. And there's maybe advantages now. They've got these super shoes, super tracks. They've got these little lights, pace lights you can go around the track and follow. So things are a little bit, I won't say easier, but there are more advantages today than there were 30, 40 years ago. And Ingebrigtsen's taken full advantage of them. But when it came to a head-to-head race, he got beat by Josh Kerr. And I think one of the reasons for that is Josh had prepared really well. He was in great shape. but it wasn't a pacemate world record attempt race. It was a race against someone else. And I think he knew that if he was in with a shout, if he was close enough with 200 meters to go, he believed in himself. He believed in the work he'd done. He believed in his coach. He believed that nobody's indestructible, despite the fact that Ingebrigtsen had been running so well. And he took that chance. He really put his foot down. And Ingebrigtsen, I think, maybe hadn't prepared as well. He prepared for world records, but I don't think he prepared to race someone. And it's a completely different thing. And maybe in a business world, you could have prepared notes for various sort of projects that you've got coming up. But if somebody is missing, a team member's missing, somebody gets a new job, there's a hole in that gap. And how do you fill that gap? How do you resurrect that program that you've meticulously done at the last minute where things have to change? And you might not have any control over why they've changed, but you've got to be able to control what you're going to do with it next. And I'm sure with what you've done, there are companies that go through that all the time. People coming, people going, people off sick. You've got a planned meeting. It's a really important one, and something goes wrong. You have to be able to roll with it and change that. Chaos theory again. It's your head's full of chaos. What am I going to do? You're frightened. So there's that fear factor again. What if it all goes wrong? What if I don't get the deal that I'm looking for? What if I don't get the sponsorship? What if I don't get the contract with that company? It's because something has gone to pot at the last minute. You've got to be able to change your mindset. Say, okay, take a deep breath, and say, right, this is what I'm going to do next. Plan B.
Yeah, you see, there's two things I do a lot of coaching and training on over the last 6 months, which just relates to what you've just said there. The first thing is working to outcomes. Okay, and lots of people I meet now go, yeah, I can't work to outcomes because what happens if that doesn't work? I can't get the outcome, can I? So what do I do? And they're missing it completely. They're missing everything completely.
Yeah.
Which is you start, as Stephen Covey says, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you start with the end in mind. So you have to imagine what that outcome is.
Yeah.
And then what great performers do is they start working towards achieving that vision. Okay.
Yeah.
And we know that's not easy. And we know that's going to be difficult. And we know there may be some derailers and some issues and challenges. But the point being is, it's not a perfect scenario. It's a dream, and then you put a plan next to it, and that's called an outcome. And then what you have to do is you have to navigate the route, don't you? You know this sometimes. If you're going to run a marathon or do a race, sometimes you might get a twinge in your hamstring, or your knee may hurt a little bit, or you just don't feel right, or the weather conditions are going to, and you have to just go, well, that's just what it is. So how do I recognize that? How do I sort of mindfully accept the weather or the knee or the hamstring issue? And then what sort of choices do I make from there? Right. And what people have to do is be more resourceful. They have to look at more choice when there's a difficulty that they occur. And you have to go through it, around it, and sometimes it could take a longer route than you anticipated. But people just want this perfect journey. They don't want the discomfort sometimes. And I know, as much as you know, that's never going to happen. But you've got to be persistent. You've got to have that grit. But also, you've got to have a level of strategy and a simple plan of how you're going to get there. Some people don't have a plan. They just live in this chaos. And they just hope for the best. And every day is, oh, I've got a problem. And then they'll reach out to them, what do I do? What do I do? There's no accountability, which is the second part, right?
Yeah.
So when you're creating an outcome, you've got to have accountability for that outcome. And lots of people manage other people. They don't lead them. And what I mean by this is, as a coach, actually, you don't give people all the answers, do you? If they're going to win a gold medal, you're not going to run it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can give them a training program, get them physically fit, physically strong. You can try to boost their confidence if there's an issue there. Sometimes you might have a day at the office or at the track where the session hasn't gone quite so well, or presentation hasn't gone quite so well. But tomorrow's another day. We can change things, and as long as you don't get stuck in a kind of a spiral of despair, then the next day is a fresh page. There was a really good story actually talking about think about the outcome. There's a guy called David Henry who was Olympic champion for the 400 hurdles back in 1968, and he was, I think, I could be wrong now, but looking back, because even before my time, Uh, he was, I think, ranked sixth going into that final. And the night before, he imagined himself winning that race from every lane. He didn't know what lane he was going to be in, but he imagined himself winning it and the way he'd run. So he would maybe set off steady and gradually work his way through the field and then come down the home straight strong. He'd set off fast and see if he could get ahead of the game and hang on as long as he could and hold the other people off from charging down at the end of the straight. He'd think about having to hurdle off of both legs or whether he could get a stride length good enough to be able to hurdle the same leg all the way around, which is what Ed Moses used to do. But the point was, every situation he was in, every scenario that he came up with, resulted in him winning the race.
Mm.
And he went there, even though he was six, and he went out there and won it in a world record, an Olympic champion and a world record, and that's pretty special to do. But interestingly, 4 years later, sports scientists have come along and they've said the average age for the top athlete is X. And David, at that point, 4 years later, was over the age of X. So he then started to think, despite the fact he'd set a 300-meter world record that year, was in fantastic shape and was the defending champion. He'd convinced himself that he might not win and said, how do I deal with not winning? So then he decided to put a whole list of scenarios together, how to cope with not winning, which is, I can see the point, but it was a disaster because then he didn't win.
Yeah, that's right.
And if it's not broke, don't fix it. What he went with on the first time round worked successfully. He'd been running well for the next 4 years. He ran well that year, but he'd convinced himself, due to somebody else's thought, that he might not win, and so he decided to try and figure out a way of coping with a situation if he didn't win, and that situation happened.
And that's kind of like, we talk about placebos, how 70% of medicine is basically a placebo. Your mind believes it's going to fix you, and your body responds, and you consume a sugar tablet, and that's what happens. But it's also the negative placebo. If you want to think yourself ill, the chances are you're more likely to be ill, aren't you? Right? If you think this pill's not going to help, if you identify yourself as a certain person, as a certain thing, right, your mind and body will connect. And he did exactly that. So his language was out of sync with what actually he wanted to achieve. He was more about protecting himself, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But we got the opposite of Daley Thompson, who was the greatest decathlete of all time, defending Olympic champion, double defending Olympic champion. He was going into the World Championships and he was injured, and he'd been pretty much unbeaten for a decade before. Going into the World Championships, his coach said, why don't we pull out? You're injured. We can miss this day and we come back another day to fight again. And Daley's response, I think, was something along the lines of, well, I think I can do it, coach. I think I can still pull it off. And after day one, the injury obviously showed, and he was struggling. He was way behind on points. The decathlon, I don't know if people are aware of it, but you get points in each of your 10 events, and those points will mount up. And it's not who wins each race, it's who amounts the most points over the whole of the 10 competitions. And after day one, it was a 2-day event, Daley was behind on points, and his coach said again, you're injured, you're struggling, we're behind. Let's pull out, you're injured, then you keep your kind of reputation of being indestructible. And Daley said, I think I can still pull it off, coach. And he said, well, you're way behind, you can't do it. And he said, yeah, but somebody else might have a bad day tomorrow. I could still do it, Now, unfortunately, in that particular case, Daley was injured, and at that level, you can't just kind of play around with people. But his mindset was that he wasn't giving up. He still believed in himself enough that not only was he good enough to do it, but that somebody else could slip up and he could still make the grade. And that's incredible. That's why you get a Daley Thompson that is, known. Probably, I won't be known for it in 100 years' time, but Daley Thompson will be known.
Most of us won't be, but Linford Christie is another great example. The older he got, the faster he got.
No,
there's an anomaly right there, isn't there?
Well, absolutely. So the David Henry situation. So Linford would have been over X when he started taking it seriously. He'd been running for years before, but he was not selected for an Olympics. Was really disappointed he wasn't picked. He was told the reason he wasn't picked is because he wasn't disciplined enough to do the work, and so he knuckled down and did it. and he gradually improved and improved and improved. And he ran against the best in the world. And he said, right, okay, they're only the best in the world because I've not got to my peak yet. And he kept going and going and going until he beat everyone. And to this day, he's now trying to coach the next generation of people as well, and very honourably. I mean, there's not many people at his level that go out there on the track week in, week out with a group of kids and say, do you know what? I'm going to try and see if I can help you guys achieve what you want. It might not be Olympics, might not be the next Linford Christie, but if you want to run a personal best, let's be honest, a world record is only someone's really, really, really good personal best. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody wants to get personal best. If you want to get the most clients you've ever had in a room to listen to you, that's a personal best. You know, you have to decide what your goal is and what your process to go and get there is going to be. And I think with Linford, he said, well, I could be as good as these people. I believe in myself. I just got to put the work in. There are maybe a few years, 6, 7, 8 years ahead of me because athletically, maybe not. He doesn't look at age, which is quite interesting. The guy called Kim Collins from St Kitts, he ran his lifetime personal best at the age of 40 in the 100 meters. Now, not many people. He ran 9.93 at 40 years old, which that's pretty special. And he had been a previous world champion, not having run that fast. So age, okay, you can't go on forever, but it's not the limiting factor all the time.
And he was running against people like Carl Lewis and Ben Johnson. Who else? I mean, there's loads of sprinters there, wasn't there, in that time era? And you think about how intimidating they must have been. But this is what most people don't do. They don't think about the process. As you mentioned, with social media and just life generally, everything is easy to access. So people want easy access. Press that button, I can get that. They have no concept now, quite often, of what it takes to achieve greatness, or even just a personal best. We're constantly comparing, right? And comparison is terrible because we're constantly comparing above us all the time, which is like the 0.0001%. Whereas, wouldn't it be funny if we had an Instagram where we compared below us?
Yeah.
Whereas most people are below us, really. We're some of the luckiest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of people haven't got free-flowing water or, a McDonald's on their doorstep. They just haven't got access to a television or a phone. And we think everyone has. So we're always, and what Linford Christie was doing there is going, these are the elite, but he wasn't comparing. He was challenging himself to go, right, how do I get there? Not why are they better than me? Why can't I have what they've got? He goes, I want what they've got. How do I? It's all about the hows and whats, isn't it? What are they doing that's giving them the edge? How can I achieve that? And then what do I need to do to go out and be disciplined and to enable me to get there? And I think people just don't ask those questions.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are missing that now. I think you're quite right with whether it's in the workplace or the sports or whatever. People aren't prepared to put the kind of work in that we used to. Good example of that, my old coach used to say, the beginning and the end in terms of fitness for the UK was the remote control for the TV. He said, if you can't get off the sofa and walk 4 feet, 5, 6 feet away to press a button on the telly, then you're already starting to go downhill. Linford was incredible because he just genuinely believed in himself. He thought these guys are just other humans like me. I'm pretty good. I can do the same thing. And he went out and did it. There's so many other examples of people that have not put a limit on themselves and they've said, I can climb Mount Everest. Hillary back in 1955. No one had done it before. Why not? It's just a mountain. Like other people who climb mountains, maybe not as high as that one, but they've done it. Why can't I? The following year, I think, well, maybe the year before, Bannister wanted to run 4-minute mile. People have got close. They've run 4:01. So why not under 4 minutes? It's only a little bit quicker. People could do it. And once he did it, 2 people did it. And then 4 people did it. And so now there's 1,755 people who run a 4-minute mile, which is fun enough. More people have actually climbed to the summit of Everest now than have run a 4-minute mile, but it does show you that both are possible if you just put your mind to it. You want to do it. 7 marathons in 7 days. That's an incredible thing what you did. And that was for charity. It wasn't just because you wanted to. You were doing it for someone else as well, which maybe that adds pressure to you. Maybe there's a little bit of a fear factor there. I've got to do this because people are relying on me.
Well, do you know what? no. But I'll tell you, I just thought, I've got a really good friend of mine, right? He's called Lee Kia, and he works at the Watford Chamber of Commerce. And he's stuck in a wheelchair, right? And at one of the events, I was talking to a group of people who, were just interested in what I was doing, the 7 marathons. And I turned to Lee and I said, Lee, mate, what would you give to be able to run a marathon? And he said, £1,000,000. And I thought, that'll do for me. It's a
Yeah,
privilege. But health
yeah,
is a privilege that
yeah,
people
yeah,
just abuse, right?
yeah,
And I just think if I can, then I've got a duty to do it. And if
yeah,
I can enjoy it, and I just thought, do you know what? All it is a jog in the April sun down the canals in Hertfordshire. It's lovely, isn't it? And I just have to do
yeah,
that 7 times for 4.5 hours. That's all it is. Yeah, but it's
yeah,
true, right?
yeah,
It's how you frame things is really important.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
didn't think about running 185 miles. I just thought about just every mile, enjoying it, right? And
yeah,
there's people who would give everything to be able to run that mile and the
yeah,
next mile and the
yeah,
next mile. And there are people in that hospice who would they change with me? Absolutely, without a question.
of
So
course.
people just need to grow up a little bit and just
Yeah,
accept the fact that their life is quite privileged.
yeah,
And if I can, I have a duty to do things that other people would dream of doing. So I don't see it as a painful experience. I see it as a duty of cause, really, because I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
these hospices, they don't have any government support, barely, anything really. So it's all self-funding. And they're so good. And I just think these things we have to do, you know this. I think you should break your life down into health, happiness, and success, right?
yeah,
There's three
yeah,
categories there.
yeah,
And running marathons helps you become healthy, doesn't it? Because of all the
yes,
training, it helps you
yeah,
mentally become disciplined. It helps you eat the right things. It helps your body change.
yeah,
Success is raising that money and feeling good about yourself, because any
yeah,
charity work makes you feel good about yourself. Well, there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. It's better than taking cocaine or drinking alcohol, isn't it? Right?
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? And
yeah,
then happiness, you can look back and go, do you know what? Last year I did that in my business. I did that in my health. I did that with my relationships, and I did that. Right.
yeah,
And if you didn't do it, you go, okay, so am I going to try that again? Am I going to readjust it?
yeah,
And just not giving up on what you want to do, it's just, I just think the fragility of people and the brittleness that they have because it's difficult. I
yeah,
hear people, oh, yeah, but it's difficult. Yeah, that's right. That's the point, isn't it? That's the whole point. Life is difficult, as you know, Rog. Every
yeah,
day, you've just got to go, what am I doing today that's going to make me better for tomorrow based on
yeah,
the circumstances? Because there's no knight in shining armor going to knock on your door and rescue you from life.
yeah, yeah.
You've got to be your own answer, haven't you?
Well, I've been really fortunate enough. I've got some terrific friends and family, yourself
Mm,
included. We've been friends now for a couple of decades,
mm,
and you've been there for me all the time. My family have been there for me all the time. My son was very poorly. Friends and family dropped everything to be with us. He did, then he started to get well. Then I got ill. Friends
mhm,
and family dropped everything to be with us. So I'm blessed. Physically, I think sport and exercise for both of us as what's given us our mindset to be able to deal with situations. Um, yeah, other people have always gone through it. I lost my parents, and it was difficult. But my friends from sport got me through that. My mindset got me through that. Certain training sessions, as you say, looking at a job situation, you might be up there and you're giving a really difficult presentation to perhaps some people that might not really believe in mindset
mm.
situations and um, positive thinking. They might come in expecting, oh no, I'm just going to listen to someone tell me something that I'm not really interested in. But if they do listen, they will learn and they will come out there a better person. And I think it's the same in sport. I've been lucky enough to have met some incredible athletes, and not just because they're incredible athletes, but listen to their talk. What they how they think, how they approach life, and I like to think that I'm a fairly sort of happy, positive person. If things go wrong, I say, well, that was a bummer, but okay, tomorrow's another day. I very rarely, everybody gets down now and again, but I very rarely are down for long.
Mm.
If there's a problem, I think, well, there's usually a solution to it. Whenever things go wrong, quite often something else will come along right to fix it just in time. If it doesn't, it doesn't, But I think that life, as you say, it's far more difficult for someone else. And if you can have that mindset where you always believe that you're luckier than a guy in Africa with no food or water or whatever, then life's good. I've got a roof over my head. I've got wonderful kids, wonderful wife, fantastic friends. I'm really blessed, and I think sport has really helped me do that because it teaches you to put up with pain,
Yeah.
which is pain and suffering, whether it's emotional or physical. I did a session years ago, and I can still feel the lactic acid in my legs now from it. And it was about 20, must have been about 25 years ago now. And it was only a very simple session. It was 4 times half a mile, but I had to run them in under 2 minutes each repetition, and that was really hard. And I was worried about the session beforehand. Did the session somehow, and I got through it. And I was a bit puffed out, but the next day was another day, and I was fine. And it wasn't going to kill me. It felt like it was killing me at the time, but it wasn't. It was a perceived fear that it was going to be difficult, and yeah, it was hard. But life's hard, and I tend to think that if you look at life positively, most things will work out. You can't control everything. If you do get ill, you get ill, But I think generally speaking, if you can think positively, you're going to be less likely to be ill, and you're more likely to recover from having been ill if you have that mindset.
Well, Rog, just on that point, statistically, if you're an optimist and you look
Yeah,
on the bright side of life, you're likely to live 7 years longer than a pessimist who looks on the dark side of life. So
yeah,
there's the placebo
yeah,
straight away.
yeah.
Brilliant. So if we were going to summarize at the end of this podcast of let's 3 or 4 tips that people need to take away and think about and action for high performance in a chaotic world, let's start off with you. What would be your first tip?
First tip would be to listen and learn. I mean, you read and listen to lots of people that have been successful. So I think the first thing to do would be well, not necessarily the first thing, I wouldn't put them in order, but certainly one of the major things to do would be to listen to people that have done it, people that have been there and done it and achieved success. And success could be not necessarily winning a race, it could be happiness, not necessarily wealth, it could be having made a fantastic group of friends, but it's listening to people that have achieved something that you would like to have done. So I've been quite lucky to have been able to do that. I think maybe just having a positive outlook on life. And I mean, right now it's 1 degree outside, but the sun is shining, the sky is blue. It's a lovely, beautiful, sunny winter's day.
Yep.
A lot of people say, "Do you know, I'm not going to go out today. It's too cold." But it's beautiful. It's it's lovely out there. It's a bit cold, so to wrap up. So there's you look at life in different ways. You get dealt a deal with one hand, and how do you deal with it with the other? So I think listening to people that have achieved success is one. Just having a mental positive outlook on things is another. Doing something physical really helps with that. It ties them both together because it gives you the endorphins, it gives you fitness, it gives you the strength of mind to go out there and try and do something. I'm 53 now, so my chances of doing anything at the Olympics are way behind. But if I help someone else to be able to make it to the Olympics, I've still done it.
Yes.
In my head, I've still done it. I've been to watch athletes that I've helped go to Olympic Games, and I've been lucky enough to be able to do that. And I've been with people that have won Olympic Games, and I've listened to what they've done and their mindset and how they approach life, not just with sport, but just life generally. And there's a commonality. There's a reason why they're successful. And if you've listened to lots of podcasts, you've met lots of people yourself, you've read lots of books on successful people, and you're going to likely be more successful because of that.
Yes, I totally agree. I honestly, I think you can't emphasize enough how important it is to extract the mental maps. You know what we talk about with mental maps in sports psychology, how people have done what they've done, because it gives you insight and can create some cognitive shortcuts that allow you to navigate through what you're trying to achieve in a quicker, more efficient way. Oh, there she is.
Hey, I
Hello.
explain it.
So yeah, extracting those mental maps and then thinking them through yourself and applying them yourself. This is the key. Knowledge is limiting, right? We're in a knowledge world where everyone's got access to virtually everything. You can Google anything and it's just knowledge. It's not, it's just information. That's not knowledge. Information that you then apply into what you do. This is one of my tips would be, put what you're learning into practice. And guess what? You'll not be good at it to start off with. Get over yourself. It's not about being perfect today. It's about what are you doing every day with the information that you're taking on board that's going to turn you into someone better for tomorrow. And that's knowledge and wisdom. And that's the discipline, isn't it? And that's the motivation that gets you to those places. And I think people are weighed down with information that they think is knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes information can go against you. As we mentioned with David Henry, the information that he got given went against him the second time round. I've got friends that I've coached or helped or advised, and then they've read stuff online or read a magazine, and the information might be slightly different.
Yeah.
And it might work for someone else, that other information. But knowing that person, because if you work with someone, you work with clients and you get to know them quite personally, and you know what works for some person, what works for someone else. A school teacher is a really good example. They've got 30 odd kids in a class. Every one of those kids is different. They have a different mindset, different interests in life, but they all have to learn a particular subject. So that teacher has to be able to find a way of teaching all of those kids the same subject, but in a slightly different way psychologically to that kid. And it's the same with running as well. So I've coached juniors, adults, masters, veterans, sprinters, middle distance, long distance, ultra distance. The commonality there is getting to know that individual and what motivates them, what gets them to respond to a certain thing. It could be that they're scared of races. They've done really, really well in training, and they're scared of not achieving what they've done in practice.
Yeah.
Because they practice so hard, and they know that they're quite good, but they don't want to put it on the line in case it doesn't come out. The outcome isn't what they really, really want. If they can go in there, as you said earlier, and perhaps maybe have a duff race, not run well. So what? No one's died. You come out the next time and do it in a different way.
Yep.
You go out too fast and die at the end. You go out too slow and you have to maybe catch up at the end, but you've left it a bit too late. Eventually, if you do the right things often enough, it will work. And some people it might take 3 or 4 goes at it. Some people have to retake exams. Some people have to, come back to your class they've listened to it, but they've not really understood it. It's not gone in. It's not sunk into them. So maybe going back to another seminar with you will allow that information to, I get it now, or maybe they've gone away in between, listened to what you said and gone away and they've not known how to put it together. They've come back and right, now I've got it. They can go back again.
Yeah, and this leads back to managing uncertainty. You've got to manage your own uncertainty. I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but I've got an idea, I've got a plan, I'm going to have the discipline to put it in play. And I'm going to manage the uncertainty, which is fear, isn't it? And part of this as well is self-optimization, I call it, which is the amount of information that's flying around that people don't start learning. They just Google things, they don't learn it. And you've got to start learning. So for example, I was helping people to present effectively to large groups. And they're very technical people. So if you were to score them out of 10 on how technically knowledgeable they are, be a 10. But then I said to them, in terms of communicating that message, how good a communicator are you? Probably an average of 3. So it's no good just being knowledgeable. You've also got to have what I call the sort of the 2 areas of performance, which is you've got to be able to have a good character. You've got to have the character traits to enable you to deliver what you're trying to deliver. So you've got to be, a trustworthy person, diligent, brave, bold, not get distracted. But then also you've got to sort of add in, what does high performance look like? The disciplines, the motivation. Once you put those 2 things together, that's when you perform at a high level. Just having knowledge, but not having the skills or ability to disseminate that knowledge to anyone else, and not consistently learning every single day is going to limit you, isn't it?
Well, there's I won't name names, but I know a couple of coaches who have a huge amount of knowledge, technical knowledge. They know every bone and muscle and fiber and nerve in the body, but their outcomes with the athletes they've worked with hasn't really come to fruition. They've been given some really good athletes, athletes that could go all the way or certain to a high level, um, but the way the coach has delivered that information, that knowledge, hasn't clicked with the people that they're working with. I like to think that I've been running 40 years now. I've been coaching for almost 30 years. Over the years, I've acquired some knowledge for some people, but that knowledge is maybe some of it anecdotal, some of it I've read, so I know the basic physiology and biomechanics of running. But it's no good just knowing that. It's knowing the individual person that you're working with and that trying to explain it to them in a way that they will understand and they will take it on board. Some people are visual learners. Some people will have to read something for it to be able to sink in.
Yeah,
I'm a visual learner, so if I see someone do something, I can physically replicate it. So perhaps with a particular exercise, if I see someone doing that, I can, oh, okay, I get that, I can do that. But I've also got to know why I'm doing it. So when I first started running, I trained really, really hard as a kid. And the only reason I was reasonably good was because I was actually very, very fit for my age. I wasn't actually talented. And as I got older, some of the more talented kids that gradually upped their training that stuck with it, I could see the difference in the level of physical ability. But I was reasonably good as a kid because I trained very hard. But I didn't know what I was training for. I
right.
trained hard, but it wasn't event specific. So if you're given a talk on mindfulness, but all you've read is a book on bodybuilding, it's going to be very difficult to get over to the. You might know in your head what you want to say to them, but unless you kind of know why you're doing what you're doing, it's very difficult to get that through to someone else. And
Sure.
knowing why you're doing it, and then being able to explain to the individual person you're giving it to, so you've got to understand them. Then then that's when it clicks. So I've had some people. I've coached a guy who was at very, very clever, went to one of the top universities in the country, very academic, but to try and get him to understand why I was giving him certain exercises and to stop him, because he was so clever, from reading up other people's information, which was getting in the way of doing what he wanted to do. It was hard, and it was a shame because he had the ability to go to an Olympic Games.
Mm.
Talking to someone else, similar situation, they've listened to me completely, but then the fear factors got hold of them, and they've not been able to go out there and compete. They won't compete for fear of it going wrong. So you've got two different types of people. One that's fearless and will go out there and go and do it, but haven't listened to the right things or read so much that they've got confused and they don't know where they're going. And then someone else that's listened to everything, but
Yeah.
it's got a fear factor that won't go and prove, go out there and prove what they've learned. So
Interesting.
you've got to try and work the psychology as well.
Absolutely. So we'll conclude there, Rog. Thank you so much. Before we go, though, can you just name drop some of the people that you've worked with and you associate with?
Well, I've been lucky enough. I'm old now, so I've been lucky enough to have kicked around with a few people. But I suppose one of my big inspirations was working with Peter Coe, Sebastian Coe's father, who coached him. Peter mentored me when I wanted to become a coach, and I thought, well, if I'm going to help someone else, at whatever level that's going to be, from beginners right through to the Olympics, I'm dealing with somebody else's life here, so I've got to make sure I know what I'm doing. And I wrote to various people, and one of them was Peter Coe. And this is before mobile phones. I physically wrote a letter to him, and it went to his house. And he phoned me on my house phone the next day and said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Is there any chance, maybe sometime this year, if you're not too busy, I could come round and maybe meet you somewhere for a drink and just discuss what you did with Seb, and because I'm looking to become a coach." He said, "What are you doing tomorrow night?" What? So I said, "Well, I'm at your house." So he was like, "Okay, come on in." Seb's mum cooked me a bacon sandwich, had some chocolate biscuits afterwards. His dad spent an hour and a half or two talking about some of the things that they did together when Seb was running. And then I thought, well, this is incredible. I didn't think I'd have the chance to be able to meet you. You know, never know the following night. And he said, you know what? Nobody's asked me how I did it. I can't possibly believe no one's asked. The most successful run we've ever had. No one's asked you how you did. She said, well, you know, the Algerians, the Moroccans, the Americans, the Scandinavians, they've asked me how I've done it. And funny enough, they were doing really well. So you had El Garouge from Morocco and you know, other athletes from all over the world. But no one from the UK was asking them. So, well, I need to know this. And some of our athletes, our most successful athletes, my old coach, Barry Tilbury, used to coach Steve Ovett, which is a contemporary of Co. I've been lucky enough to Daley Thompson, Denise Lewis is regarded as a close friend, Mark Richardson, many others. I've been lucky enough to Kelly Holmes and Colin Jackson, we've met, Danny Gunnell. They've all been incredible people that I've been lucky enough to have bumped into and try and pick their brains on different things. But I think with Peter, I really struck gold because he didn't come from an athletic background, but he was an engineer. So he was intelligent. He understood what he wanted to do. He knew what his kid was capable of. And they decided, with the information, the knowledge that he learned, how to deliver that to Seb and get the best result possible. And Seb was a type of kid, luckily, that was quite happy to listen to his dad and do what his dad said. And they had a mental trick as well. So at home, he was dad, and at the track, he was Peter. And so they were able to differentiate home life from being a coach, because it can be quite stressful being the dad or the mum or of an athlete. Liz McColgan's coaching Elish McColgan at the moment. I'm sure there must have been difficult situations there, especially when Liz was so good, and then her trying to deliver the information to her daughter, who's now gone on to break her own mother's records, which is quite good. But you know, Shalana, I'm very proud to have known, because she was a young girl from Slough. No particular reason why she should go on to do anything, but she's been very successful. She got a degree from university. She went on to become British indoor and outdoor champion, European indoor champion, world bronze medalist, fifth at the World Outdoor Championships. This is, and what I like about that is that she's always remained grounded, and she's always remained Shalana. We'll go around for dinner. She'll come around and babysit the kids, but she has taken every advantage given to her. Whereas a lot of people will say, "Well, I can't do this," or "I haven't got that. I've not got the super shoes. I've not got the advantages someone else has given." So they've given up already, you know, and they may as well find something else to do. But I've been lucky enough to have met Steve Cram at talks, a mindfulness talk, actually, funny enough, in Reading, and he was talking about his mindset and what he did and how he became successful. And he was 4 years younger than Cohen Avant, but he had two of the greatest role models ever to learn off of. And he got into some of their races, and he said, "Okay, this is what they've done." And he eventually went on to become the next Cohen Avant 4 years later. And he tried to pass on that knowledge to other people. And it's just an incredible sport. It's incredible. But I've met people outside of athletics that are incredible at what they do as well. I mean, you do what you go. You just said you've been all over Europe teaching people mindfulness and how to improve their business through their mentality and maybe physicality. You know, maybe you might want to talk during one of your lectures about what you do physically can help you mentally. And there's so much information on that at the moment. I'm just starting to read a book from Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's quite interesting there, talking about my own excuse at the beginning about not having enough time. There is always time. If you make time, there's time to do it. We just put blocks in front of ourselves when there isn't one.
Absolutely right. It's prioritization, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even this, we're just meeting up now. It's lovely to catch up with you, because
likewise.
we've been trying to do it, but we've both been busy.
Yeah.
I can make one day, you can't make another. But it's nice. And this for me is what success is.
Yes.
Is being able to meet friends and keep in touch with friends. I've lost several over the last couple of years. And because of that, I've decided that instead of meeting up at a funeral and say, "Oh, we must catch up sometime," I say, "No," because that never happens. We say, "Right, next Thursday at 1 o'clock, I'm going to meet you at the Dog and Partridge. we're going to have a drink. We're going to do it," you know, because otherwise you won't get there until.
Correct.
You know.
So, Rog, how can people reach out to you? Where can they find you?
Well, if they're willing, then performancerunning.co.uk on the internet, as Peter
Mhm.
Kay would say. I'm quite happy to give out my number, my personal number, to people. They can ring me, leave a message on 077 347 31238.
So I'll share all
They
those
can,
details on the podcast, which would be great.
yeah, they can get hold of me however they want to. I'll be delighted to try and help them with anything running related, particularly middle and long distance running. But if, I can try and put them in the right direction if there's other events, which I like to do. There's some great coaches out there in different disciplines, pole vault and hurdles and so on. So it's not just me. But one of the things I was quite proud of, and still would be, I'd love to resurrect again this year, would be the summer camps for kids, which we've
Yes.
spoken on. And we maybe 100, 120 kids on some of those camps. Some of them went on to become teachers and coaches and personal trainers. Some went on to become national athletes. Some went on to international athletes. One of them this last year broke the European record for 400 meters, which is really exciting because he was just a kid on the camp 10 years ago, and now 10 years later, he's the British record holder and European record holder for 400 meters. So it's been interesting watching his progress. That's Matt Hudson Smith, by the way. Um, and some of those athletes, like Shalana, Melissa Courtney Bryant, they've come back on the camp as international athletes to give their experience to the kids. You've come on there and delivered talks on positive thinking and the mentality of, how to get the most out of yourself psychologically on the track as well. So if we can resurrect those camps, that would be fantastic. If there's any sponsors out there that would really, really
Ah,
want to
right.
get behind this project, it's incredible. Some of the people just made friends and
Yeah.
had a nice time and had a tough week training, but it's so important because I think back in 2007, the first year I did it, there was two girls that made friends. One was from Cornwall, I think, and one was from Slough. And to this day, they're good friends. They met for a week on a camp.
Mm.
And then 10 years later, we were doing a project and we had these t-shirts on. And a lad in Dubai was in a lift and another boy noticed his t-shirt and said, "Oh, where'd you get that from?" And he said, "Oh, I went on the summer camp." I said, "I went on that last year." And two kids in Dubai.
Mm.
Sport is so good for getting people together, and I think that's why we've kept such good friends as well. Because
Yeah.
apart from you're a good guy and you make me laugh, you're funny, and we have a similar kind of mindset in certain ways. But there's that sporting connection as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's so important. It's got me through life. It's got me through difficult
Well,
situations. Yeah, I'm blessed.
well, there you go. That's the last point, isn't it? Always have a sense of humour because
So,
life
well,
is absurd, isn't it?
you've got to have a sense of humor. I think my wife's got a sense of humor because she puts up with me. Yeah,
Brilliant.
I'm so lucky. I'm happy. I'm too stupid to be sad.
Mm.
I think
Oh yeah,
that's
no, I get that. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I don't mean it in that bad way.
No,
But, no,
absolutely. I
but
think some
dumbing
people
yourself
overthink
down
things.
sometimes. Yeah, they overthink it.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, you can overthink things, and then you get worried about stuff.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
there could be an asteroid heading our way, but what are you going to do about it?
yeah,
You
that's
just
it. Yeah, yeah.
there's nothing you do. Just enjoy life.
My friend, brilliant. We will catch up soon. Thank you so much for this podcast, and yeah, I will have a beer with you soon.
I